Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're here.
We had a great show for you. And
we thought we'd bring you this one instead.
And then what happened to that show, Steve?
Gremlins.
Why are we here again on recording the day after we record? Why am I talking to you?
The Mummy's Curse. We covered it, but I'm blaming it on that.
So there were two topics discussed yesterday that you will probably never know about. And by that we mean we'll probably rehash them months from now.
Right. So instead we got you two new things, and I'm pretty excited about mine.
And I'm very not excited about mine. This was a real, I actually, I'll be honest, I am excited about mine because it's really what I always wanted to do since we started the show. But it is the laziest fucking thing I could bring to the table this week. And it was always meant to be a break glass in case of epic technical fuck up.
Which you would hope would happen later than episode 6. But
yeah, because this could literally be me just reading, and then by the end you're so fucking bored we end the show.
Yeah, I'm running on 4 hours of sleep, so
yeah,
about a total of 8 hours of sleep over the last 3 days. So it's going in a good direction.
Yeah,
but if you're not familiar with the show, what we do each week is we bring 2 or more random topics to discuss, and they should be interesting things. So they at least interest me and Ben.
Right.
So the hopes are that there's some other people out there that are also interested, but if not, at least we're entertained.
Yeah. Usually it's about for me. It's about finding something that's just randomly weird and kind of funny. But we don't really limit it to any one topic. But this week it's going to be a little bit different. This might not be our normal listeners' pace because normally we do kind of topics that require a little bit of research. Due to our fuck up, and by that I mean Steve's fuck up, my audio's fine on my end. Next week we'll be back to our normal research-based stuff. This week it's going to be a little more narration, and like I said, this could be just a case of Steve hearing this whole story and then at the end being like, okay, well, I'm going to my topic now. But feel free to jump in if things get silly. Because it will get silly, because we're going to be reading a creepypasta today. I don't know how familiar you are with them.
Not very. I mean, I cook a lot of other types of pasta, but not.
You try not to scare yourself with dinner. Understandable. Creepypasta is totally my shit as far as the internet goes. It's just you can find a ton of them on creepypasta.wikia.com, and just that is a dangerous hole to fall into, because you will just read mostly terrible, scary stories for hours if you're anything like me. There's some good ones in there too. It's a whole community, so there you will find one occasionally where it's wow, that guy has some real writing chops. But a lot of them are real fucking dumb, and it
sounds like the kind of stuff that my dad used to tell in, I'll say Cub Scouts. It wasn't Cub Scouts, but it was a similar organization. And, you'd go on the camping trips, and it wouldn't just be my dad, all the dads. You'd be in a crappy little cabin, crammed around, and they'd be telling these scary stories, but they're pretty awful.
Yeah. Creepypasta was kind of the area where things like Slender Man and stuff kind of came. Well, Slender Man came out of the Something Awful forums and stuff, but it sort of spawned this whole movement of internet horror stories that I dig a lot, because I love horror as a genre, and bad horror especially is very entertaining to me. And I could literally just click through stories and read them on this show and forever, but hopefully we'll only need this one. It's pretty long.
Let's start over here. Welcome to Creepypasta.
Yeah. Again, if this fucking bombs and the people are just this is terrible, Next week will be better. But this was a story written by a capital D Kingsbury.
Dkingsbury of the Kingsbury clan.
Yeah. This is called Ronald McDonald House.
Shit, I'm too scared already. Can we go on to the next?
Yeah, clowns are involved. Fuck this. All right, I'll just start it. I'm sure you've heard of the Ronald McDonald House charity. They provide housing for families of sick kids when they're in the hospital. Seems pretty innocent, right? Well, there's another side to the charity. There's another type of Ronald McDonald House, one that not many people know about. There's one in most big cities. You won't find it by looking for it. It doesn't have an address. It doesn't have a sign above the door. It doesn't even have windows. No, the only way you'll find it is if you're taken there. That's how I found it.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, so if you want to jump in and make fun of this, please do, because I'm going to.
I might just make like sound effects and stuff. So if you hear weird noises, that's me being stupid.
I was thinking like I should get some like horror ambient background noise.
Right.
But that would require more editing, and I have even less time now to get this show ready. All right. I've never met my real parents. I've been in and out of foster families and group homes here in Detroit since I was a kid. I'm 15 now, and I'm what they refer to as a bad kid. All caps.
Is that the term for it?
Yeah, all caps. Always causing trouble, always getting thrown out and placed with another unsuspecting do-gooder who thinks they can help me. I always prove them wrong. Dumbass. Trying to give me a home. My caseworker sat across the black metal table looking weary and frazzled. On the table between us was a thick letter-sized brown envelope, my case file. Well, your reputation has preceded you, she said, and now you only have two options, military school in Lansing or the Ronald McDonald House, which has miraculously cleared you for acceptance. I love like any kid's story where it's like military school. Like,
but Mom,
it's the most fucking 80s to 90s
right
setup for any horror story. I don't have the patience for drill sergeants and 5 a.m. reveille. I actually don't know that word. Touche, D. Kingsbury. I'm going to assume that just means you don't like waking up at 5 a.m.
Reveille.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
oh, yeah.
that thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that, the phrasing. I don't have the patience for drill sergeants. I just don't have time for push-ups right now. And how bad could a halfway house named after a fast food clown possibly be? Ronald McDonald House it was. Dark clouds loomed above me the day I climbed into the back of my caseworker's town car. My few belongings in a backpack and the clothes on my back. That's all I could take. One of the few belongings I had was a photo album filled with pictures of all the foster families I had been with. It was nice to remember some of them, even though I had royally fucked it up each time. As a bad kid. It doesn't add that, but I assume every paragraph here ends as a
bad kid. I was going to make the comment that these stories always have that, like, all I could take was my few possessions. Well, no shit. You can't take more than what you own.
Right.
Like, were you going to just start taking the fax machine that was in the corner?
Yeah.
Like, oh, nope, I wasn't
all I
allowed
could
to
take was
that.
all of my belongings. I've had a few cases who went through the Ronald McDonald House, the caseworker said from the front seat. Things went so well for those kids, I never had to transfer them anywhere else. In fact, the house took over their case files and everything. We drove into downtown Detroit past all the familiar landmarks. I had been thrown out of one foster home just outside town because I snuck into downtown Detroit with some neighbor kids to sneak into a dive bar. Good times. Bad kid. Well, here we are. The car came to a stop. I looked out the window. We had parked in front of a tall, gray, windowless building, sandwiched between two other industrial buildings on a narrow city street. I noticed there was an address on the building to my left and one on the right, but none on this particular building, not even a sign. Are you sure? I asked, hesitating as I opened the car door and climbed out the back seat. I slung my backpack over my shoulder, clinging tightly to the strap, and followed the caseworker up to the windowless metal doors. She pressed a buzzer and spoke to someone inside, and the doors clicked to unlock. We walked in. As soon as the metal doors closed behind us, I noticed the pin-drop silence. It was that sort of silence that is so oppressive and empty it almost deafens you. I don't know what that means.
No, but like everybody uses it. I've probably used it before because I'm a terrible like fiction writer.
Yeah, like it just this thing that does the opposite of that thing is doing that thing to me. Like, great. I have no idea reading that sentence what I just read. Across the dimly lit lobby, there was a glass window with someone inside, a secretary. She was turned away, typing something intently. We walked over to the window. The caseworker rang a bell on the counter, and the secretary spun around in her chair. Her face was painted like a clown. like Ronald McDonald, in fact. She even had the short, curly red hair. Otherwise, she wore a typical white nurse's dress.
Wouldn't you like notice the short, curly red hair like before she spun around? Cause
yeah, you would totally just see the person at the desk and be like, "Oh, that's fucking Ronald McDonald."
Right.
Because anyway, like Ronald McDonald hair isn't like
it's not discreet.
It's not unique to like, wow, red hair people all look like Ronald McDonald. Like, no, you're going for that look if you have red hair, like, and you curl it that way. I wanted to laugh at how bizarre it was, but I couldn't. A chill swept down my spine. So you didn't want to laugh, is what that means. Something was not right. I watched as the nurse and my caseworker interacted. Paperwork was passed through the window. The caseworker slid my case file under the glass as the nurse slid her some papers to sign. As my caseworker signed the papers, the nurse looked at me. Her smile should have been warm and welcoming, but all I saw in her eyes was hunger. I can't stay here, I stammered loudly. Take me to the military school in Lansing, please. What's the matter, sweetie? The nurse asked, her voice muffled slightly by the glass. Afraid of clowns? I looked into her hungry eyes. Now there was a malicious glint as she laughed.
Hungry eye.
Yeah, that starts playing, and then you get eaten by a clown. That's the Ronald McDonald House. My caseworker laughed too, obliviously, and said, Now, don't overreact. You'd hate the military school. Besides, this will be good for you. Doesn't specify why, but we'll take her word for it.
Oh, caseworker's obviously in on it. She's evil.
Well,
I don't know in on what yet, but
I don't think she's evil. It pretty much flat out says in the beginning that she just doesn't like having to do the work. So it's like, it's great. They take the case file and everything.
That's the end of that chapter.
Any good caseworker never follows up.
Right.
Yes, said the clown nurse, this will be good for you. Before I could object, I heard a slam behind me. I spun around to see an open door in the far front corner of the lobby to the left of the front desk window. There was no one there, just the light that flooded in from the door. Then the creeping shadows, shrill, echoing laughter, and growing shadows along the wall inside the door. Oh, said the caseworker, here comes the welcome committee. As I stared in horror, clutching the strap of my backpack, my caseworker patted me on the shoulder for the last time. Don't worry, honey. It'll be different this time. You'll feel right at home here, I promise. She turned to leave. I felt bile churning in my stomach. No, I said desperately, you can't leave me here. Oh no, I've got to get going. I never did like clowns. And with that, she left me there. The metal doors slammed
smart lady,
behind her,
yeah.
and I was alone.
You'll be fine, but this place is fucking creepy.
This will be good for you. Now I'm fucking out of here. I faced the open doorway by the front desk again. The shadows had almost entered the room, and the piercing laughter was filling the lobby with sound. I ran for the front doors, pounded and yanked and pushed and screamed. Screamed for help, screamed for my caseworker, screamed for anyone. Please, God! I turned to see the nurse behind this glass smiling at me again. And then they entered, laughing all the while. A whole group of laughing nurses with clown faces and red hair, some male, some female, but all with the same terrifying Ronald McDonald makeup. And in the dim light of the lobby, I could see the glint of metal tools in their hands. Coming up the rear was a pair of clown nurses rolling a metal table, complete with restraints. Get the fuck away from me, I screamed. I pounded at the metal doors again. Let me out of here. They surrounded me, grabbing me as I thrashed and screamed and tried to tear myself away, laughing as I kicked and squirmed. They slammed me onto the rolling table and strapped me down. I looked around wildly. I was surrounded. Let me go, I screamed, twisting and turning and pulling at the restraints. They rolled me through the open doorway and down a seemingly endless white hallway. They laughed and laughed and laughed. They waved their shiny scalpels and razors and needles mere inches from my face, just to make me flinch and scream. This made them laugh even harder. The last thing I remember before one of them finally injected me was the hands. Gloved fingers prodding inside my mouth and pulling at the sides of my mouth, distorting my screams and forcing an unnatural grin onto my tear-streaked, sweaty face. Hot, rancid breath in my face, and the whispered, perverted voice speaking the words, "We love to see you smile." Fucking great, isn't it?
It's awesome.
Then, as the maniacal laughter seemed to warp and wind down like a dying record player, everything faded to black. Sometime later, I opened my eyes and I was blinded by bright lights above. Shielding my groggy eyes from the fluorescent bulbs, I turned on my side and looked around. A cell, tall white walls covered in scratch marks and stains. A small drain in the corner of the floor, my toilet perhaps. A door with no windows, and on the floor by the door, my backpack. I tried to sit up, my body ached, and the moment I sat upright, my vision started spinning. Wonder what they drugged me with.
Drugs?
Yeah, the good shit.
That would be wouldn't that be a weird thing to, like, specifically think? Like, not, like, you know you've been drugged, but you're like, I want to know the specific drug.
I wonder where I can get more of that shit. Is that what they put in their breakfast sandwiches that make them so good?
That's why you feel sleepy after you've eaten too much.
And that I ordered too much. Oh, man. God bless the Ronald McDonald House. I realized I was shivering. I looked down. I wasn't wearing my clothes anymore. I was wearing a dirty, ripped hospital gown. What the fuck kind of, like, house for kids? Like, did the caseworker always just leave before the, like, main doors could open? Like,
there's clowns here. It's got to be fun, but I don't like clowns.
But I don't like clowns, so this isn't fun at all.
In fact, I've never heard of anything like whatever became of any of the millions of children I've brought here. But
all right. I was wearing a dirty, ripped hospital gown, bright yellow with a pattern of Ronald McDonald heads all over it. Nothing underneath. I like... Do you understand it's McDonald's? We have to put his face on everything.
Yep.
Nothing underneath.
They need you to know that you're at the Ronald McDonald House. That's...
Yeah. And so they have a uniform, and it's just a hospital gown. I heard faint, muffled sounds from somewhere in the building. It sounded like screams. I tried to stand, but couldn't keep my balance. My vision was beginning to stabilize, but my body still felt like rubber. I sank to my knees and crawled over to my backpack. Before I got there, I tried to open the door. As expected, it was locked. I slumped onto the floor beside my backpack and unzipped it. All that remained inside was the photo album. They had taken my notebooks and pens and my cell phone. Of course they did. I wearily opened the photo album, but instead of the photos that had been in there, photos of myself from my previous foster families, photos where I had attempted to look happy and hopeful, even though I knew I wouldn't be there for long. Instead of those photos, they were like crime scene photos, and each one I recognized one of my former foster families, brutally murdered and covered in blood. My heart raced and my stomach churned. I began to turn the pages quicker, each page a new photo, a new family, a new carnage. I recognized their faces and the inside of their homes. I had lived with all these people, and now they were all dead. I came to the last few pages, a photo of a house at night, then a window of that house, then the inside of the house, a dark hallway with the light coming from one doorway, then a photo of my caseworker, brushing her teeth at her bathroom mirror, then a photo of her looking at the camera in horror, then a photo of the caseworker naked, covered in her own blood, contorted into an unnatural position in her bathtub.
I kept this one for personal reference.
Turns out she was right not to like clowns. I turned to the last page. Written inside the back cover of the photo album were the 3 words, "You never existed." I felt bile rising in my stomach. This guy likes bile as a word.
He does, and he has a lot of it in his stomach.
Yeah,
like,
it's...
I mean, I get it. We all do, but I don't. I rarely. Maybe he just has heartburn. Like, that's why he was a bad kid.
Nobody ever gave him Tums. I felt bile rising in my stomach. I threw the book to the ground and crawled over to the hole in the floor and vomited. Somebody shouted up from the hole, "Hey!" No.
Sweet.
No, that would have been great, though. They were right. Having killed everyone who ever knew me, it was as though I never existed. I heard more faint screaming in the distance. I knew I had to get out.
See, I also have a problem with this. Like, I get what they're doing here. Like, oh, they're all dead now. There's no link back to me. But, like, he started by like how many families he'd been through and
Yeah.
the caseworker, and it's like, yeah, they have the file. Police wouldn't just be like, well, 37 families were slaughtered last night, and this
They were
this
all
caseworker
foster families.
and this foster family caseworker, but we just can't put it together.
Yeah, well, maybe the clowns own the police. You haven't thought about that.
Maybe they slaughtered all the police. Like,
yeah. Well, now the police don't exist because they left a weird photo album on the doorstep of the precinct. I wiped the vomit off my face with my hospital gown and crawled back over to my backpack. Hopefully they hadn't found my secret weapon. I unzipped the front pocket and reached down into the very bottom, my fingers scraping the fabric. Sure enough, they were there, flush with the seams in the bag nearly undetectable. The pins I used for picking locks. I told you, I'm a bad kid. It actually says that.
It says that one.
I leaned against the door and listened. I could hear footsteps approaching, but just as soon as they had come, they faded in the other direction. I knew I had to work fast. I jiggled the handle with one hand and picked the lock with the other hand. It was surprisingly simple. Holding the handle, I slowly pulled myself to my feet. I could maintain my balance now. I pulled the door open just a crack. A clown nurse darted past. My heart almost stopped. But his footsteps didn't slow or change and soon faded. He didn't notice me. I poked my head out the door, seemingly endless white hallways in either direction. The distant screams were louder now, coming from all around. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. I decided to go to the right. Passing doors identical to the door I had been behind, I heard the screams and sobbing coming from behind each one. I stopped for a moment at one door. I heard the crying of a child inside. I jiggled the handle to see if I could let him out. Locked. I kept moving, looking behind me every few seconds to make sure no nurses had come into the hallway. Then I passed a set of white double doors. I stopped for a moment. The word "play place" was written in tall, thin letters across the width of both doors. I heard more.
As a bad kid, I just couldn't resist a ball pit.
As a bad kid, I couldn't resist peeing in the ball pit. I heard more screaming coming from within, the screams of multiple people, and laughter, the insane, shrill laughter of the clown nurses. I shuddered. I was afraid to find out what sort of torture was happening inside, and I knew I had to keep moving. I saw a door ahead with a stairway symbol. I headed for it. As I opened the door, I glanced behind me and saw two clown nurses emerging from the playplace room. Their white nurse outfits were covered in streaks of blood. I quickly shut myself into the stairwell, hoping they hadn't noticed me. The stairwell was dimly lit, with cement walls and rusty railings. I looked behind at the door I had just closed. There was a red number 5 on the door, so I must be on the 5th floor. I decided I had to get to ground level. Each footstep echoed as I began to descend the stairs. I couldn't hear the screaming anymore, just a low, deep humming sound like pipes in the walls. It was a welcome respite. I finally came to door numbered 1. The staircase seemed to descend a few floors lower, but I stopped here and slowly peeked through the door. More white hallways. No clown nurses to be seen. So far, so good. I stepped through the door and walked into the hallway. I noticed I couldn't hear any screaming on the floor, just the buzz of the fluorescent tube lights above. I came to the end of the hallway and another set of double doors. A large red cross, the kind you'd see on a lifeguard stand or a first aid kit, was painted across the width of the doors. I pressed my ear to the door. All I heard was a slow, rhythmic pulse like a machine at work, and faintly a beeping sound, like you'd hear in a hospital room. I knew I shouldn't open the door. I knew this wasn't the exit. I knew I should keep looking, but I had to see. I turned the handle. It wasn't locked. I peeked inside. It was a cavernous white room. Fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed. I saw wires hanging all around, and hanging from the ceiling, in rows, kids. Kids in the hospital gowns like mine, attached to white wooden crosses affixed to the ceiling, literally crucified. And the blood was going into the special sauce, I assume. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the imagery... Like, you could make this about anything. Like, why is it the Ronald McDonald House? They were silent, their heads drooping forward, their eyes either closed or staring at nothing. Some seemed to twitch a bit, but most were still. Their crosses swung back and forth very slightly. And the hanging wires, they weren't wires. They were the intravenous tubes attached to the kids' wrists, tubes sucking out their blood. I almost vomited again right then and there. In a very center of the room, amidst the rows of hanging crosses, I could see where the rhythmic pulsing sound came from. A huge cylinder, which seemed to be collecting blood from all the tangled tubes that dangled from the kids' wrists. I opened my mouth to scream, well, maybe to cry out in anger. All I could say was, "What the fuck?" Which is a good reaction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an understandable reaction, except for I think even seeing that, my number one goal would just still be quiet as shit.
Yeah. Holy shit! What is it? Yeah, maybe you want to cool it. That's when the alarms began to sound, loud, piercing, like the police sirens of hell. They must have realized I was missing.
Hell has police? Like,
yeah, hell is only police.
Well,
and
makes sense.
And they're always after you. It's just an episode of Cops. And it's always like they track you down, and then they're like, "Well, why'd you run?" It's like, "'Cause you're the fucking cops." Like,
those piercing sirens.
Don't you realize it would have been a lot easier on you? I would have only kicked you 3 times. I shut the doors and frantically glanced around the hallway to see if anyone was coming. No signs yet. I ran for the stairwell. As soon as I entered the stairwell, I heard laughter from above. Like, these guys just, what's the point of alarms? Just start laughing. Yeah, basically. Echoing and reverberating through the stairwell, the clown nurses were coming. I stumbled down the stairs as fast as I could. I must have gone down another 3 stories before I reached the basement. I found myself running through a dark sewer-like hallway, with small light bulbs overhead every 10 yards or so. The smell of decay and rotting flesh grew more and more pungent as I ran. The laughter continued behind me. I managed to glance behind and see a group of them running after me. I saw them come...
Wait. I like that wording, too. Like, I managed to glance behind.
Yeah.
Like, I should get a gold star for that. I don't know how I did it, but I managed to somehow finally look and under...
It would have been a very short story if he's like, I turned my head to get a quick glance and they tackled me.
Or I turned my head and I managed to catch a glimpse of him before running headlong into a pole.
I tripped into the ball pit and I never got out. I saw them come into the light and they then become silhouettes again. Their smiling faces and gleaming knives and needles pushing my adrenaline to the max. So, I like that they just have knives. Like, I get the needles. They're trying to drug the kids and shit, but I like that they're just like, well, fuck, if we can't catch them, stab them. I ran past alcoves full of stacked, rotting corpses, because there's got to be rotting corpses in every creepypasta.
Sure.
But I couldn't stop. I couldn't think of anything but escape. I turned a corner and found myself facing the metal rungs of a ladder in the wall. I climbed until my head smacked the ceiling. Below me, the shadows and laughter grew closer. Their footsteps slowed. They were close and they knew it.
This kid seems to have problems with between the I managed to get a glimpse and then I crawled until my head hit the ceiling. Like, you're going to climb a ladder without looking up. Like,
yeah, it was dark, man.
Yeah, that's
it's always dark. I pushed out the ceiling above me, heaving upward and panting and screaming. The clowns were below me, laughing and waving their scalpels. Something cut my leg. I screamed and pushed one last time. The ceiling gave way as a manhole cover slammed onto asphalt above. A circular opening. I climbed out and frantically pushed the manhole cover back over the hole, blocking out the laughter of the clown nurses below. I laid there on top of the manhole cover for a few minutes as I caught my breath. Rain fell onto my skin. The turbulent night sky above was a welcome sight. I looked around. Abandoned buildings, broken glass, no lights, no cars, no signs of any life at all. A police siren somewhere in the distance, then silence. I climbed to my feet. Pain shot through my leg. I looked down and saw the cut on my ankle where a clown nurse had slashed me. Bastards. Limping the best I could. Yeah, that's the only way I can think to read that. Limping the best I could, I started to walk. Hello? I called out. The only answer was a distant roll of thunder.
Again, and this isn't on necessarily this story because it's very common, but like you're get into a new room basically, and then you start calling for people. It's like, as far as I'm concerned, anybody that might hear you call hello is also going to be a bad person. Until I like,
yeah. Well, I mean, you're right, but technically he is on a street now. Like, he got out.
Sure, but
you are.
It's a street. You got out of an entrance that it was unlocked and led directly to this hell house.
Yeah, you're completely alone, and like clown nurses want to fuck you up. So, yeah, you're in. It's still a sneaking mission, Snake. The only answer was a distant roll of thunder. Somebody help me, please! I shouted. My foot fell on something soft and mushy. I looked down. A newspaper. I peeled it off the wet asphalt. Most of the ink had faded, but I was able to make out the date. July 13th, 1992. I didn't even fucking plan that today. Like, it's July 13th. Holy shit.
13th, it is. Wow. Perfect. Creepypasta.
Yeah. Oh, shit. I dropped it, and an icy dread filled my stomach. I kept walking. Can anyone hear me? I screamed. Please, anyone. Please. My words faded into delirious sobs.
No, did I forget or miss something? Or, like, because they gave the date, but I have no context for that. Like, he seemed to not like reading that date, but, like, when did the story start? Is he back in time or forward in time? Or is it just the very next day? I don't...
I wish I had an answer for you. Like, this is the thing, like, where it's like...
My least favorite day. I had a pit in my stomach.
Yeah, like, it doesn't give you any date at all. I can only assume he wrote this as supposed to be, like, a modern day thing, and then, like...
That's kind of how I'm picturing... Now, I could be doing the thing that I yell at my wife for all the time, where we're watching a movie, and they'll, like... foreshadow something, and she's like, oh, what does that mean? And I have to say, we don't know yet. We'll get the answer in a minute. So maybe it's coming.
Just they'll tell you. Just give it a second.
Right. So maybe I'm pulling the same stunt here, but yeah. It was struck me.
No, they don't pay this off at all. My words faded into delirious sobs. I stood still for a moment. The rain had soaked through my thin hospital gown. I shivered as the wind blew. Then I saw a light in the distance. It was a big yellow M in the sky. A McDonald's, of course. I limped toward it. Because, of course you would. Because... You fucking... What?
Well,
finally.
There's 3 other cardinal directions I could head, but of course.
But you know what? A double quarter pounder sounds pretty good right now.
Pretty fucking good. I'll have extra kid sauce, please.
Knives and needles be damned. I'm getting a Big Mac. When I came to the McDonald's, I saw that apart from the M, the rest of the building was completely dark. I walked cautiously toward the broken windows and looked in. Darkness. I turned and surveyed the place outdoor playground. 10-foot-tall structures of colored tubes for kids to crawl through. Sitting at one of the benches was a familiar figure, the Ronald McDonald statue. You know, the one where you could sit beside him and it looks like he's got his arm around your shoulders. Every kid has seen it. I shuddered at the sight. The doors were unlocked. I walked in, out of the rain. Silence. Darkness. I noticed that the decor wasn't like the modern McDonald's you see. It was still the same as it was in the 80s, with the white plastic booths and the red and yellow tiles. The wind seemed to whisper through the broken windows. I noticed something on the front counter, a black rectangle. I got closer, a laptop, a nearly new laptop. I let out a soft, delirious laugh. I knew what I was supposed to do. So I took the laptop outside and sat beside the Ronald statue. I opened the laptop and began to type this story. The rain is falling on the keys, but I don't care. There's nothing left to do now but wait. Because I've been noticing, out of the corner of my eye, Ronald is trying to look over my shoulder. He's laughing now. All I can do is join him. The end.
I love it.
That's like, I didn't remember a lot of the details of this story, but I remember that fucking ending and just laughing for about a good hour.
I like that. I saw the laptop. I knew what I had to do.
Yeah, it's like there
or
has
you
to
could
be,
just not do it and keep walking.
Otherwise, I would have to write an ending where the character actually got out of this shit. So,
and I'm a little insulted by the insinuation that being sent back to the year 1992 is like the worst fate possible. I grew up in the 90s. That shit, I'd be happy to go back.
Yeah, I mean,
fuck, McDonald's had personal pan pizzas at the time, and that's pretty good. I mean, they might be trying to kill you, but at least I can get a pizza with fries.
Yeah, I was born in 91, so yeah, if you could go back a year, there was one better, but yeah, I don't know what the point is of that date, but it's great. We'll post this with the citations or whatever, but they do have the Ronald statue photo on the bench, with a dark blue effect on it to make it scary. It's pretty,
scary, yeah.
It's pretty great.
I'm a little disappointed if you're going creepy McDonald's that they left out, especially when you tie in at the end of the 90s. Like, where's Grimace and Hamburglar? And because those fuckers were all creepy. Like,
right. Maybe that's Ronald McDonald House too.
The housening.
But that worked better than I thought it would. That was fun. Yeah. Like I said, I've kind of always wanted to do it, but it is very cheap to just read somebody else's shit. So Dkingsbury, wherever you are, thank you for the entertaining story that I...
Yes, and I will throw in there, like I kind of mentioned it once. Yes, we're laughing at various things in the story. No, I'm not meant to make fun of the writer or anything like that.
We've anyone who's ever written anything has churned out some shit. And
at the end of the day, it was a really entertaining story, which is what you want from a...
Yeah, myself included. Like, I've written short horror before, and I can guarantee you anything I read from here is way better.
Right.
But so it's all in good fun. And if not, this episode will never see the light of day. But yeah, that's that took up a little bit more time than I thought it would. So let's get into your...
I do have a topic that I hope this continues, because I just keep stumbling across things like just randomly that turn out to be the best fucking things I've ever read. So over the past few decades, advances in modern medicine have been pretty astounding. Just from a personal point of view, I specifically remember I've been at my current job for like 16 years, and it's there were a lot of times when I first started where people would be like late on their bills, and you'd find out they'd be like, oh, I had to go in for a heart stent, and I've been in the hospital for 3 weeks. And now the exact same surgery, they're like, oh yeah, I went in for a heart stent yesterday, and then we went hiking. So like, there's been some awesome advances in medicine over the last few decades specifically, which is a good thing, because not that long ago, the medical field was just a fucking nightmare. So John R Brinkley was born in 1885, and he wanted nothing more than to be a doctor. By age 21, he was traveling the country with his wife selling patent medicines. If you're not familiar with patent medicine, snake oil, basically. We've got tonics to cure hair loss and flatulence and big noses, that kind of thing. He also spent time being a sidekick to another man named Dr. Burke, who sold virility tonics. So same deal. Basically, they traveled around. He pretended to be a quacker doctor, apparently, like, not quack, but I said quacker, Quaker doctor, assuming that like you couldn't trace the fact that, hey, they're Quakers, there's no record, whatever. But he was a sham salesman, but he wanted to be an actual doctor. He worked various other like non-scamming jobs as well, but the doctor dream remained. I think he was just like obsessed with the white coats or the money. To that end, he decided to move with his wife to Chicago, where he could enroll at the Bennett Medical College, which was a fine, unaccredited institution known for its questionable curriculum and focus on eclectic medicines. So basically bullshit doctory, but there was an actual school for it in Chicago.
Nice.
Him and his wife had a daughter, and between the expense of raising the family and the cost of tuition, by the third year he had to take a second job. Basically, it was the same job, but he was working like 2 shifts at like a utility company and then going to school to pay for everything. Until one day he came home to find that his wife Sally had taken his daughter and left. She filed for divorce and asked for alimony/child support money. I don't know how it worked back then. But instead, John kidnapped his daughter and fled to Canada.
Like any,
Yeah.
any good dad,
You're in Chicago, you're halfway to Canada anyway, just go for it. So his wife was unable to get...
Let's get a real doctor in here, Dr. Phil. To be like, you two need to stop fucking bickering and think of your daughter.
Problem. Right. Well, Sally apparently was unable to get an extradition order from Canada, so she dropped the request for alimony, allowing him to come back to Chicago, where they got back together. It's like, I tried to leave you, but you outsmarted me by kidnapping our kid.
Oh, so you're always a step ahead with your fucking child napping.
So their relationship was on again, off again, until it was finally just off. But in the meantime, John and his wife had left Chicago, largely to avoid paying the mounting medical tuition bills. He made it 3 years through the 4-year program and then just couldn't afford it, so he took off. And that's especially in the early 1900s where they didn't have like cell phones to track you down and hound you. It's just like, meh, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
They moved to North Carolina, then Florida, then back to North Carolina. His wife, Sally, left him for a third and final time, because shockingly, a relationship where one tried to divorce the other so they kidnapped the kid just couldn't make it work.
Those poor kids.
But John decided to try to re-enroll in a new medical school and finish out his training because he still wanted to be a doctor.
Did he, though?
Unfortunately for him, Bennett Medical College refused to forward his credentials to anybody because he owed him a shit ton of money.
Also, they were uncredited.
Well, that too. Like,
so there are no
today that
credentials.
wouldn't, right? But well, unless you're going, apparently there was just all sorts of scam like schools back then. Unfortunately for him, there was a bigger scam, and in fact, they've had these up until like the 90s. Diploma mills. He just bought a fucking medical diploma and said, "Hey, I'm a doctor now." And,
well, that's really, that's kind of how I felt about my time in college. Was like, anyone can make that paper.
Right, that's all we're doing. We're just taking 4 years to do it. And he's just like, fuck it. Here's my money. Give me the paper.
Why don't I just write this down? I am a doctor. Now
it's on the wall, folks. You got to recognize it.
I drew a smiley face at the end.
So after buying this fake degree, he did serve a very brief, 3 weeks as a reservist in World War I. That said he spent most of that time in the sick bay with a nervous breakdown. So, it is what it is. But when he got back, he had seen an ad in the paper mentioning that a town called Milford in Kansas was in need of a doctor. And by Jove, John just happened to have a paper saying that he was a doctor. So him and his new wife moved to Milford, Kansas, because apparently there was no other qualified applicants that wanted to move to Kansas. And they established a clinic.
Okay.
Yep. John quickly gained the favor of the townsfolk of Milford because he became known as someone that paid his employees a good wage, which I don't fucking know how. Nothing explained that, because up to this point he's been broke and running from creditors, but he was good at paying his employees.
Well, that's nice.
He made frequent house calls, and he did a really, really good job. There was a flu epidemic at the time, and he did actually a very commendable job treating these people. Apparently, treating the flu was something that was included in the first 3/4 of your medical training.
I just imagine him winning over the town, ladies and gentlemen, immortality for everyone. Just tossing out water and shit.
Water, yeah. But apparently, he had a pretty successful practice. He was doing a good job treating these people. But it was, the flu. Basically the flu is just, here, keep cool and take this, but whatever.
Right.
And then came the goats.
More animal shit.
As the story goes, one day a man came into his clinic to ask Dr. Brinkley if he'd be able to treat someone who was sexually weak. I imagine it was kind of one of those conversations where it was so, I know a guy that has this problem with his junk.
This is how a lot of pornos start.
But, one of these guys that has the problem himself but doesn't want to admit it. So it's my brother, he has this. And if he had this problem, would you be able to do anything for it? And John Brinkley, the doctor, he joked that the man wouldn't have this problem if only he had the balls of that young buck goat outside the window.
No.
And an instant later...
Nope.
Inspiration struck.
Fucking what?
What if the man did have the goat's balls? The patient begged John to give him the goat's ball.
Then he would have useless fucking goat balls attached to his shit.
Yeah. The man begged him to perform the operation, and John agreed to perform it for a mere $150, which is roughly $1,800.
Well, who can pass up a sale?
The patient's son would later claim that it was actually Dr. Berkeley who offered to pay the man for letting him perform this experiment. So John gave the man goat's testicles.
That's something. That's bullshit. That's something to save his dad's pride or whatever. No, actually, I got paid to have a dumb thing done to me. Yeah, I would never pay for it. I'm not stupid.
So he performed this operation. Apparently, the procedure quickly took off because I guess guys will do literally anything if they think it'll make their equipment work better. The problem is, as you've probably guessed, transplanting goat testicles doesn't work. I mean, it would never work, but it especially won't work if you're literally just placing the goat's balls in the scrotum and not, as they would say in medical circles, hooking them up to anything.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say if he needed a class to tell him that you can't do this and it doesn't work, probably not cut out to be a doctor.
Hey, the early 1900s were a wonderful time where medicine was still magic, and if it sounds like it's going to work, it's going to work.
What the fuck is wrong? Like, that guy, like, okay, I'm sexually weak. You know, it's interfering with my life. I get, like, the desperation there. Like, these fucking people, like, wanting a bullshit, bad idea surgery like it's fucking gas station Viagra. Like, what are they thinking? That's the thing is...
You can tell that the actual thing was that this doctor had like come up with this idea himself, and as soon as he was presented with a chance to like test it, he's like, all right, let's go. But he literally was just putting the goat's testicles in patients, like not surgically attaching them. They just, you know, cut them open and here they are. And so what the body actually does, as modern medicine will tell you, is it rejects it. You know, it just kind of like absorbs them as a foreign body and they don't do much of anything.
Yeah.
If you're lucky. But he was excited by his self-proclaimed genius and all the cash that was rolling in once people in the small town.
It's totally like a porn advertisement, though.
Yeah.
Do you want to come for hours? Get goat balls.
He'd even implant them in women near the ovaries because why the hell not?
I can think of like a million fucking reasons, and the first one is it's goat balls. Why don't implant them anywhere? Keep them on the goat.
So, you know, treating the flu is one thing, but performing untested medical surgeries is another, particularly when you never finished med school at a school that's not really a med school anyway. And he also had this like bad habit of showing up to work drunk. Shockingly, a lot of his patients developed infections and a number of them died of complications. But despite...
Goat balls sounds complicated. Living with them, yeah, it's not easy.
But despite that, and what had to be like the greatest stroke of sheer dumb luck ever, the wife of the first patient gave birth to a healthy baby boy, and that story was picked up in the papers, and that was like the best advertising that you could ask for back then. Like, man who is sexually weak has goat testicles implanted and sires a healthy baby boy. So, despite people getting infections and dying, it continued to fucking take off. Like, everybody was flocking to his clinic because he was the only one in the world implanting goat balls in people. And he kind of figured, you know, as this genius doctor that he decided he was, if it worked for impotence, it must work for other things too. So he used his vast knowledge of the first 3/4 of med school to decide that his treatment could definitely cure 27 different ailments. My favorite, they listed a few, but my favorite of which was flatulence. Like, I don't know what a medical necessity flatulence problem is, but I don't see how goat testicles play into it either way.
Well, we found out that if you just apply a little bit of goat testicles to your forehead,
No, it wasn't even application. He was literally every patient inserting them.
Yeah, I know. I'm just like...
I don't want to know where you insert goat testicles to cure flatulence, but we'll leave that up to the imagination of the listeners.
These poor goats. Because, you know, they're just thinking, like, it's not going to work. Leave me alone.
You'll love this next part. He leveraged all the media attention he was getting to start a massive advertising blitz and partnered with a firm. And they came up with the slogan, "The ram that am with every lamb." So I don't even know what that's supposed to fucking mean, really. And I was trying to parse it, and there's like, the only way I could really think is the ram that am with, like, so it's like, oh, the ram that can do every lamb. The problem is a lamb is like a baby, like, goat. So apparently they're saying, take this and you'll be able to fuck babies. Like, I don't know, but it kind of rhymed, especially if you read it back in like the old timey voice. But
let's go balls and get your dick hard. That was their other idea for a tagline.
So the trade-off here is he's getting all this positive attention and he's making tons of money, but he's also drew the attention of the American Medical Association, who sent undercover investigators to scope out the clinic. While there, he met a woman who had been treated with goat balls to cure her spinal tumor, because why not?
Yeah, just plop one of those things into your back and you're good to go.
Good to go, yeah. Apparently she was hobbling around because, shockingly, it didn't do shit. But,
probably fucked up her spine.
Right. You think the last thing you'd want if you're trying to deal with a tumor is another foreign body, like, added into the equation, but whatever. So this certainly put Brinkley on the American Medical Association's radar, is how they put it. Instead of putting him out of business, you'd think, as I got through the story, you find out that the American Medical Association back then was not what the American Medical Association is now. But it did also grab the attention of one Dr. Morris Fishbein. I love that name, Fishbein, and we're going to hear it a lot. He was a doctor that was famous for his devotion to rooting out and exposing medical frauds. So here comes the nemesis. I know you're not a big Simpsons guy, but I'm picturing him being like the Rex Banner to Homer's like beer baron, if you've seen that up.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you goat testes, doctor. No, you won't. So in 1922, the owner of the LA Times, one Harry Chandler, invited Brinkley to LA with the following challenge. Brinkley was to perform the procedure on one of the LA Times editors. So, just so you know, a career in journalism has always fucking sucked.
Who did not volunteer for this.
Right. That's kind of how I'm picturing it. Like, you write for the paper, and the owner, and this is one of the most powerful papers in the world at the time, comes down and is like, yeah, so there's this story about this guy that's been planting goat testicles in people. And you're like, oh, God. And he's like, yeah, we want to get to the bottom of whether or not this is real. Be like, yeah, that's a good story. Like, so we're just going to ask him to cut your balls open and put some in there. It's like,
fucking,
what?
Like, no joke, I am feeling sick thinking about this fucking operation. Right. It's so fucking gross and so fucking stupid. God damn.
But anyway, Chandler, the owner of the LA Times, said if the operation worked, he'd use his publication to make John the most famous surgeon in America. And if it didn't work, John's career would be damned. Like, I like that he said damned and not doomed, like he was going to physically place a curse on him. So, the dude knows just how powerful he is in America at the time. But because the state of California isn't completely stupid, like a lot of us claim it is.
We're not going to fucking let you.
Right, they wouldn't recognize Brinkley's medical credentials, and thus would not authorize him to perform said surgery in the state. However, Chandler had enough pull to get a 30-day medical permit, and the operation was performed. And the operation was...
Fuck Chandler, too, because it's like, this is bullshit, but you're like...
You're just doing it because you want, it'll be a story that'll sell papers.
Yeah, this is your product, too, you asshole.
So, 50-50. If it goes good, it'll be good. If it goes bad, he'll ruin them. But it was judged to be a success, presumably because the editor that had the operation didn't want the entire world to know that he still had ED problems. Like, the story is going to be huge, and they come to you like, so does your penis work now? You're not going to be like, no.
Yeah, like you got goat balls put in you to, like, cure something. You're not going to admit the goat balls didn't work and that you're an idiot. You're going to be oh, no, I feel a lot better.
Yeah. I did my wife like 3 times. Is that a normal amount? Is that good? What amount's normal? That's how many I did last night with her.
I certainly did kisses with my wife last night.
Yep, all of them.
Yeah, 2 smooches and then 1 for good luck. And then I went to bed. So being a success, Chandler made good on his promise and ran stories extolling the benefits of goat ball operations, and Brinkley's popularity skyrocketed. He started getting high-profile patients. This is L.A., so like movie stars started coming to him for these operations. If a goat doesn't like eat his nuts off, I'm not. This doesn't have a happy ending for me.
Yep. So he decided he was going to close his clinic in Kansas and open one in L.A. because that's where the money is. But once again, the state of California refused to grant him a medical license because citing large inconsistencies and lies on his application. and just not any real medical background, all of which had been brought to their attention by one Dr. Fishbein. So
Fishbein kill this fucker, man.
He's a fucking hero. He's like, I am not letting this go. So when that didn't work out, he returned to Milford and he expanded his operations there. In 1924, he founded a new radio station and began broadcasting programs that largely served as advertisements for his practice. Early 20s would have been about when radio stations, like, there weren't a lot of radio stations. So when you buy it, set up a transmitter and start a station, like, you have a huge area captive to you. But that same year, numerous high-profile publications began publishing pieces railing against, like, these diploma mills, which led to a grand jury trial out in San Francisco that led to guilty verdicts against 19 individuals who had either ran the mills or used their services. And due to his questionable medical application in California, which again was large part discovered thanks to this Dr. Fishbein, Brinkley was one of the individuals convicted. However, the governor of Kansas refused to extradite him to California to be arrested because he made too much money for the state. Well, he was bringing in shitloads of money, and a lot of it was going back to the state. So the state's like, nah, we see no problem here. In fact, it said he had, like, overhauled their, like, sanitation system and built roads and, like, all sorts of shit. So Kansas is loving it, especially Milford. And they decided, well, what's a few dead patients if we're getting all this cool stuff from it? So with the governor of Kansas blocking extradition, Brinkley got on his radio station and was bragging about how he beat the American Medical Association and Dr. Fishbein, which is probably a mistake.
Yeah.
Fishbein doesn't seem to be one to let things go. But he must have been feeling the pressure because in 1925 he decided to go to Europe in an attempt to secure better medical credentials through honorary degrees.
So basically, go to school.
School.
Jesus.
But he knows if he actually learns medicine, his medicine's debunked.
All of his professors will be like, you did what with goat balls?
Yeah. But he's also so full of himself at this point because, part of it is he does think that he's some medical genius. And so he figures with all the success that he's had, which, success is...
See, I thought I was a genius when I added jalapeno chips to mac and cheese.
Right.
You know what that didn't do? Hurt anyone.
Anybody. Maybe the feelings of the mac and cheese people that were like, oh, we thought it was good as is.
It is good as is. I made it better.
So he goes to Europe just to get honorary degrees, presumably approaching these schools like, look how successful I am. Can I have a diploma, please? All the schools he approached in the UK turned him down, but he did find one in Pavia, Italy that would grant him an honorary diploma. So now he's feeling all high and mighty thinking, look, I even have a diploma from an Italian medical school. But when Dr. Fishbein and one of Brinkley's former professors heard about this honorary degree, they petitioned the Italian government to revoke it.
Man,
and that was eventually
all over his shit.
Yes, which is good to know that at least somebody, like the whole country, is volunteering for these operations, and at least somebody has like some wits about him. Like, no, this needs shut down now. So they petitioned the government to revoke it, and eventually Benito Mussolini himself ordered that the degree be revoked. But of course, Brinkley just continued to claim that he had the degree right up to the day that he dies.
Well, hang on. If Mussolini liked it, then we need to do a 180, and now I'm pro goat balls.
But he had the paper, so it continued to hang on his wall. It's one of those things. Fishbein's crusade grew more fevered, and he published a number of articles that featured the tales of former patients who have either got very sick or died after their procedures. The problem was that Dr. Fishbein is a doctor, and all his articles were published in the AMA journals, which are really only read by other doctors who already knew that this was full of shit.
Right.
You're preaching to the choir there. That's as the saying goes. On the flip side, Brinkley had a radio station and newspaper articles and ad campaigns that were read by thousands and thousands of non-doctors who continued to flock to the clinic with the promise of magic goat balls.
You could compare it to a lot of TV doctors and stuff today. how they have more of a platform than actual experts.
Right, but if an actual expert
bullshit.
writes out a medical piece, a peer-reviewed piece on why the TV doctors bullshit, only other doctors read that.
Right.
So, but the station also started running a segment called Medical Question Box. It's kind of like a goat ball centric love line for the time, where callers would call in and ask medical questions.
My goat balls itch. What do I do?
Well, not every medical question was answered with goat balls as the cure. Callers were often prescribed by phone with proprietary treatments, which could only be received at Brinkley Pharmaceutical Association network pharmacies. So basically, it's a big fucking racket. You'd call in and be like, "Oh man, I've had a migraine for 4 days," and they'd say, "Well, take this medicine that we sell at our stores, but you can only get it administered at our network stores." They were being prescribed for non-intended uses. So these were actual medicines that were available anywhere, but only these network stores would allow them for the use in these situations. And then of course they would sell them at highly inflated prices. So you'd be paying 4 times what the exact same medicine was at a regular store. And of course, a lot of that profit got kicked back to Brinkley. So, in addition to this Dr. Fishbean, the state of California, and Benito Mussolini, Brinkley was starting to rack up a lot of enemies. The pharmaceutical companies whose medicine was being misused urged the AMA to take action, but the AMA claimed there was nothing they could actually do other than they would tell people, "Hey, this isn't good," but at the time, the AMA apparently had zero actual
this
power.
This only ends with Fishbean fucking him up in a parking lot.
He hires Coleman Allen from last week to take him out. Kansas did have a competing radio station, and they began airing anti-Brinkley stories. And you got to assume that the families of the at least 42 patients who died were also, not particularly thrilled with Brinkley. In 1930, the Kansas Medical Board finally had a formal hearing and revoked his medical license. So I guess by then they we got all the money we need out of this guy. Let's shut this thing down.
Yeah.
Then a few months later, the Federal Radio Commission, I think the precursor to the FTC or whatever, refused to renew his broadcasting license because he was broadcasting mostly advertisements, which was against the rules. His broadcasts were labeled as obscene because they were presumably talking about penis problems, and that the Medical Question Box show specifically was contrary to public interest. So they shut him down on his radio show and his medical license because everybody knew it was bullshit, and they were done using him to get what they wanted. So with broadcasting and medicine now out of the picture, Brinkley turned to politics, setting his sights on governor of Kansas.
Oh my fucking God, dude. I've never wanted a character in one of your stories to die more. And I heard about Allen last week.
And this was a flat-out admission, but he figured if he became governor, he could appoint favorable people to favorable medical positions that would work out favorably for his chances of returning to a medical, practitioner.
He would run school. Just read a fucking medical book.
Right. And I get as a young buck, he had no money. Now he's a millionaire. You could afford to go to school. I think now he was just too arrogant. I'm this famous, successful doctor. I'm not going to medical school.
I haven't proven shit about any of my jackass ideas of healing, but I'm a doctor, damn it.
So he decides to run for governor. He had to run as a write-in candidate because he'd missed the registration date and the ballots had already been printed. But he'd hold these rallies where he'd run on a vague platform of programs to benefit the public. I guess the slogan that I read was a lake in every county or something or a state lake in every county, that kind of thing. If you elect me, I'll make your life good somehow.
Everybody will get a baguette every Tuesday.
Right. He'd be joined on stage by a famous and super popular country singer, Roy Faulkner, and he'd also hire a private plane. Of course, this is in the 30s, early 30s, so that was very extravagant, but he'd hire this private plane to fly him into, it would land at the rallies so he could make a grand entrance. So basically, he was running on pure spectacle, which sounds very familiar. But
right.
Whatever. So 3 days before the election, the Attorney General of Kansas, who had previously prosecuted Brinkley's medical board case, announced that there was new write-in rules, and in order for the vote to count, the name would have to exactly match one specific format, J.R. Brinkley. So if you wrote him in, but you did it in any other way or misspelled the name, the vote wouldn't count. So Brinkley won 30% of the vote, roughly 180,000 write-ins, but lost the race. And it was later admitted that there were between 30 and 50,000 votes for him that were disqualified under that new law that was introduced 3 days before the election. And had those votes counted, he probably would have won. So by now you can see that people in higher up positions are starting to realize we need to stop this guy.
Shit, he almost became a goddamn leader.
So that was 1930. He ran again in 1932, but again lost with only about 30% of the vote. Prior to the second run towards governor, Brinkley purchased a place in Del Rio, Texas, along the Mexican border, in order to help establish what was called a border burner station. This was something new to me too, but apparently at the time Mexico was pretty pissed at the U.S. because, like I said, radio was just coming into wide public use, and the U.S. stepped in and they divvied up all the different frequency bands and sold them all to U.S. companies, leaving none for Mexico. And Mexico's like, what the fuck? Because there's going to be overlap there. You don't have radio waves don't stop at the border. So Mexico wasn't really happy, and they were more than happy to take someone's money like Brinkley and set up these very powerful stations literally right on the border that they could blast over the American bands just to be a big fuck you. So that's what he did. And his station, although it was in Mexico, just across from Del Rio, Texas, was powerful enough that it broadcast well into the United States, including Kansas. And so he used this new old radio power that he had to campaign for governor, but it of course didn't work. It's because he lost that election as well. So once that failed, he just decided, what the fuck, I've got a radio station, I'm going to go back to medical based programming, and basically brought the medical question box back. He also started selling time to other advertisers, and you can imagine what kinds of advertisers would want to advertise on a program like Brinkley's. So all sorts of just quacks and stupid schemes. My favorite out of all the ones I read, there was one advertiser that was selling autographed photographs of Jesus. So
what the fuck?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how. I'd like to think, especially since this station's based in Mexico, that it was actually autographed photographs of Jesus, and it was just some Mexican dude that signing photos of himself. But eventually, he opened a medical clinic in Del Rio, Texas, because apparently Texas was okay with him performing surgeries. And he did more goat ball surgeries, but he kind of shifted his focus and started doing more experimental, treatments for prostate and colon operations. Because, you're done screwing with people's balls. You want to go next door, I guess. Of course, he was equally unqualified to do that kind of surgery. And then I think I get a Pulitzer for this pun, but as a proctologist, he was quite literally making money hand over fist. He was able to build a large mansion for him and his wife in Texas, which included many things, such as exotic imported wildlife from the Galapagos.
The Galapagos sounds like something Brinkley would call it.
I put that in there, though, because I love the Galapagos Islands, and it kind of makes me mad that this asshole, quack doctor had so much money that he could bring that the islands to him.
Yeah.
Bringing me some turtles, which in and of itself is awful.
Yeah. While you were telling me the story, I just looked up a picture of him, and he is a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm. I've got a line about that at the very end, but I can bump it up. To me, if you look at a picture of him, I thought he looks like the love child of Colonel Sanders and Billy Corgan.
I could see that. He just looks like any sort of weasel.
Yeah, very much.
Any movie you've ever seen, just the
including
stereotype.
the little round glasses that all evil doctors had.
Yeah, the little fucking eyes that just I'll just say I'm gonna screw you over, and
And at this point, he's been driven out of California, driven out of Kansas, but he's making millions and millions of dollars in Texas. But his business was eventually choked out by a competitor that opened up like next door, offering the exact same stuff at a discounted quack rate. So he just closed up shop and started working in Arkansas. The same competitor eventually followed him to Arkansas. So apparently,
I like this guy. What
this guy's the second guy's just as asshole, but he's like, my business model is to just follow this other asshole around and beat him to the punch.
Fucking undercut him. Let him do all the promotion for these products, and then tell him that it's 10% cheaper.
Yeah. So now he's moving around, but he's still making a ton of money. But all the while, good old Dr. Fishbean had not given up. In 1938,
Fishbean is just like throwing knives into a tree with his photo on it.
It's the Charlie from Always Sunny thing where he's got all these papers and lines, and he's just like, I'm going to trap him some way. 1938, he published this huge, like, 2-part work, not just on Brinkley, but it included very detailed, like, review of Brinkley's seedy career, like, including, like, the patients that got sick, the ones that died, the fact that there's no medical backing for any of this, and detailing like his actual medical training, which was nothing. The best part of this, and again, it's just a piece, and its effectiveness is going to compare to like how it's received by the public who's getting these treatments. Except Brinkley got pissed and tried to sue Fishbean for slander. Unfortunately for Brinkley, the court quickly ruled that in Fishbean's favor, citing the small fact that Brinkley was indeed a quack by, and as they put it, any conceivable and commonly understood definition of the term. So now he's legally been like found by the court to be a quack. And so not only did he lose that, but once a court legally determines that you are a medical fraud, it really opens you up to litigation from all these other people you've been screwing for years.
Right. And so, the public is going to be like, wait, legally he's a fraud?
Right. So all these lawsuits start streaming in from families of people who have died or got sick or whatever. And then the IRS begins investigating Brinkley for tax fraud.
Yeah, of course. That's the period on anyone's bullshit is like, if you're cheating at anything, you add taxes.
And then the U.S. Postal Service begins investigating Brinkley for mail fraud.
Well, that's just weird.
So, this dude was into all sorts of fraud. Well, I assume the mail fraud had something to do with sales of pharmaceuticals or this or that. Or
Mr.
whatever.
Brinkley, the only thing true about you are your nuts.
Goat nuts.
Your goat nuts.
The only thing true is that goats are afraid of you. Very afraid. So, and then in 1942,
nuts.
And then in 1942, he died after having 3 heart attacks and losing he had 3 heart attacks and lost a leg to amputation, and shockingly couldn't survive that. At the time of his death, Brinkley was flat broke, and donkey ballectomy, as I termed it, because I never came across an actual term, was no longer a popular practice because it never even remotely worked in the first place.
Yeah.
So there's kind of it's one of those things where you see it time and time again over human history where some horrible person finds some horrible way to become rich and powerful. And then the end comes quickly because that doesn't sustain itself ever.
Right.
I mean, if nothing else, if none of this stuff had happened and he never got sued and lost, somebody who got goat balls implanted would have got pissed and shot him in the face. I mean, your days are numbered when you decide to start messing around with people's testicles.
I wouldn't say your days are numbered. Like, if anything, this is a depressing story to me for just how many people got onto that celebrity worship with this fucking guy.
Yeah.
And it's that's how easy it is for people to be duped, because we're not really that much smarter as a people now than we were back then. So
that's the thing is it's one scary, this story was kind of hilarious to me, but also amazing that it happened, and it was fun to read, but you also see a lot of very scary parallels to modern day shit. It's easy for us to look back and be like,
look at the
people,
dumb things they were doing.
Goat balls, they're how dumb are they? But we fall for similar shit. It might have moved on to different different disguises, but yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of things like happening now in plastic surgery that, and fuck, maybe even real surgery that like a few, like give it another century, people might look back on and be like, what the fuck were they doing to themselves?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too, though, is as bad as this guy was, he really gets credited. There's some things I left out, like specific notes. Because of him, he played a large part. There was other doctor, like we could probably start a whole podcast on just these quack doctors and the shit that they pulled. But he was one of the biggest ones that really helped bring in like medical reform as far as like medical boards and what needs to be approved and what can and can't be. So there was some silver lining there where he fucked it up for all the other, but people find little loopholes. That's why this still, like the plastic surgeons we've heard about in like New York that are injecting concrete into people's faces as plastic surgery routine, that kind of stuff. It still happens. But so the other great thing about, his demise came quickly and swiftly. He lost everything, and then he died like of terrible medical complications, ironically. But he's also going to be forever known as like the goat gland doctor is what they called him. I would just call him Goat Balls.
Yeah, Goat Balls. Dr. Goat Balls.
The only problem is when I first started, and you get that line at the beginning that was so great about like, here come the goats, and what if you had goat balls? And it's hilarious. I found that going through all my notes, by the like 37th time that you type goat balls, it's lost basically all. It starts to sound like an Applebee's appetizer. Like,
yeah, it sure does make an interesting search history you have to explain to your wife. But I mean, yeah.
So that's Dr. John R. Brinkley, one of the greatest terrible people ever.
Well, Fishbean, you weren't fast, but you got the job done. Good job. Yeah, fuck that guy. Seriously. Wow.
So if you'd like to buy non-essential brand goat balls, contact us at.
Fucking dude, like.
I mean, obviously,
as soon as I saw where the story was going, like that's just the worst fucking image to me. Like,
well, I mean, obviously, anybody that had like any medical expertise whatsoever would know is goat balls do shit. You got to use gorilla balls, like
because they're related to us,
and they're bigger and strong. Like, I don't want to have the sexual prowess of a goat.
I don't know if I want the. I don't know if I want the drive of a gorilla though. Like they.
That's true. That's yeah.
Like I already probably have a problem. Like I don't need like an entire season where it's just I can't control it. I have to do this all the time. So yeah, how about everybody keep their balls to themselves?
Yeah.
I think we can all agree on that.
And keep your balls to yourself. Bum, bum, bum. We're getting to the point in the series where I can just start singing random lines poorly because that's what happens when
I'm going to cut it out.
So yeah, that's the show this week.
Hopefully
if you made it through it, if you made it through, you deserve a medal. And if I get my audio to bin, I deserve nothing because that's the bare minimum of what I'm supposed to do.
And if I get the audio back, then I get rewarded by having to get ready for the next episode. So get ready for that.
Hope you enjoyed creepy clowns and creepy surgeries and
creepy clowns and goat balls. Yeah. The show has it all. I'm too tired to plug shit. If you want to plug shit, you go ahead and plug shit. It's all the same shit we always plug.
All the same. And as you pointed out, if you're listening to this, you probably know this already, but you can find us on Twitter at NonEssentialPod. We're hosted on Libsyn. You can find us on iTunes and Facebook and Instagram, whatever Instagram is. All sorts of places. Spotify, I think. I don't know if our shows showed up there yet, but
it will.
Yeah,
maybe.
So great things on the horizon, and we'll have another great show for you next week. Until then, enjoy.
Toodles.